Morning. So I don't have PowerPoint slides. I want this to just be a conversation that we're having. Let me get a sense of the room. How many of you will be going on the job market and are going to be doing some campus interviews coming forward, first time out on the market? How many of you are in a current job and returning to the market? And then the rest of you are in some other stages. So I am going to talk primarily about the research talk and the teaching demo, although some schools have sort of moved away from the teaching demo, but the premises apply to both. I want to start by saying there's lots of resources out there for you. This will not be the only thing you can get, and what I'm offering is not so incredibly groundbreaking that you couldn't get it somewhere else, but this is a good conversation for us to be able to have and you to have opportunity for questions. The other thing I want to say is that I've titled it Telling Your Story, not only because that's sort of a buzzword today in business, but because story is how we connect. And I have served on both sides. I have been a candidate on many, many campus interviews, but I've also served on search committees from provosts to adjuncts, from the sciences to the humanities. And one of the things that stands out the most to me is we remember the people who had a narrative. We remember the people who gave us a really clear sense of who they were as a teacher, a scholar, and a colleague. And so I'm going to kind of walk through what we would traditionally think of as a story, from characters to setting to plot to climax. So that's going to be kind of the frame. Before I get into that, though, I have sort of two pieces of advice when you find yourself in the lucky position to be getting a campus interview. First, celebrate. We are working so hard, you're hustling, you're writing, you're publishing, you have students, and we often get in that culture of busyness where we don't take an opportunity to be really proud of the work we've done, to be proud of the career materials that we submitted that landed us that interview in the first place. We just don't take a breath and say, way to go, right? I got through today and I got some things done. So I hope that you'll do that first. And then the second thing is to think about some self-care. As you go on these kinds of campus interviews, it's going to be a really busy day. They have you running from meeting to meeting. Sometimes they schedule it in ways that are kind of bizarre. I've eaten a granola bar hiding in a bathroom stall when they didn't make a lunch break until 4 o'clock for me, right? So find times to take care of yourself before you go, to take care of yourself while you're there. Whether you have special needs or even unspecial needs, when you see the agenda they send you, ask for adjustments where you need them, and don't forget that these are really anxiety-inducing processes, and if you don't feel like you're taking care of yourself, it doesn't matter what preparation you've done. You're going to lose all of it the second you get in front of those people. So practice some self-care. I just came from the mindfulness collaboratory, so it's kind of on my mind to sort of take a minute as you walk into the room, as you're doing your work, and so you'll hear this kind of theme of self-reflection and self-care throughout my talk. So I'm going to start by walking through the conventional parts of a story. And part one is characters. So first, who are you? You have spent hours writing and preparing and defending a dissertation or grading papers. Your head has been in the computer screen, and I'm going to ask you to take your eyes away from the screen, up from the paper, and really think about who you are. And you think you know who you are, but until you've really sat down and engaged in some real deep self-reflection, it can be hard to get beyond the place you went to school, the topic of your dissertation or your research, right? That's the stuff everybody's sharing. Everybody's saying, you know, my PhD's from the University of Illinois, and I'm very proud Illini alum, but everyone's got their school, right? So how can we help you stand out? So the first thing is to sort of ask yourself, who are you as a scholar? And I mean, really, what got you into this in the first place? What excited you? Why did you pick this field? Why did you pick this topic? What do you feel when you're doing this research? Where are you energized? You might not share all of this out loud during your talk, but you need to know it before you walk into the room. You need to know it to write the talk, to do the talk, to answer the questions, to do those one-on-one interviews. So what is it about your research that's compelling? What's your goal? Do you want to do applied research? Do you want to be working on research 24/7? Do you want to have more teaching than you do research? You have to know some of these things, both to pick the schools you apply to, but also to really know how to answer the tough questions. When they ask you about being a scholar and you just talk about your method and your data, that's not memorable. We want to really hear the passion. And that doesn't mean to get floofy and sappy and give us all the backstage of, you know, how hard life is, but to really think about what's compelling about the work, what it's contributing to the field. If you can connect it to the people in the room and how you contribute to what they're doing in the field, if you can kind of create that sense of connection and community, you're going to be remembered when you walk out of that room. Typically, people are doing 3 to 4 candidates. I've even seen 6. And that sounds like that you could stand out among 3, but those are long days. They have you going 24/7, right? I went on one that was a 4-day long campus interview. If all of us were 4 days, I don't know that they're gonna remember me. And so one of the things to be really thoughtful about is really what you're excited about in your field. And the benefit of that is it brings you back to that joy. It brings you back to why you got here. Because when you're trudging through that dissertation, I remember, and you never want to look at it again, this is an opportunity to say, actually, there was something here that kind of got me going in the first place. The second is to ask, who am I as a teacher? Even if you're going to a Research 1, and almost especially if you're applying for an R1, even if teaching is going to be a smaller part of your load, what will help you stand out is if you have a narrative about who you are in the classroom. What kinds of classrooms do you like? High energy, lots of discussion? Are you doing experiential learning and community engagement? Do you like one-on-one opportunity with students? Do you want to do research with undergraduates or graduate students? Do you believe in mentorship? What kinds of classes can you offer to that particular place? And what would you want to teach? What's the dream class that you've never gotten a chance to teach, but now you finally could join a program and get to create that class? And knowing some of those things, especially at a place like an R1, really helps you stand out, that you've given that some thought, that you're a prepared teacher as much as you are a scholar. If you're applying to a community college or a liberal arts school, that probably feels sort of standard, that you know your teaching story. But again, taking that step beyond, I can teach these 3 courses in your curriculum, to really having a compelling story about who it is you are in that room, what kinds of relationships you like to foster with students, what motivates you as a teacher. Third, who are you as a colleague? And if you are just coming out of your program, you may or may not know, but this is a good time to kind of watch your faculty mentors and say, who are they as colleagues and what would I like? But also think about who you want to work with. Do you want a collegial environment where we're constantly collaborating, we're co-writing together, we're checking in about students, or are you someone who's solo work and then you just want to get to business in meetings? Although good luck with that, because in meetings you almost never get to business. But really thinking about what it is you want as a colleague and knowing how to talk about that, because one of the questions you will get often in these interviews and even during a research talk is, tell us how this would work in our department, tell us what you'd be doing once you were here, why are you a good fit? And that's such an amorphous, vague term, what's a fit? But again, if you have a story, they're gonna be able to figure out, and you're gonna be able to figure out, are we lining up, right? Is something happening here? Is there some chemistry here? Are they responding well to my story? Do I like their story, right? To get a real sense of whether you're gonna be a fit. And then after you've done all of this, who are you? I want you to think about, who are they? Who are they as a faculty? First of all, know their names, all of their names. Look at the website, look at their research, have a sense of what they're working on. If somebody's won an award recently, if somebody's doing some really cool project, you should know some of that when you walk in the room. But also know about their department. What's their mission? What are the kinds of things they're doing in the classroom? What are the kinds of goals that they have as a department? You can get a lot of this information just by kind of browsing what's on their own web pages and taking a look at those things, or asking around, right? Use the network here at NCA and find out who they are as a faculty. And who are they as a student population? Now, I know that right away makes you think demographics, age, class, race, gender. And that's actually important. You should know. You should know if they're first generation students. You should know if there's a lot of athletes. You should know if there's a lot of Greek life. You should know whatever it might be. If there's students committed to missions and community engagement and change makers versus students who are really into research versus students who really want a professional outcome and are just looking for a job. You should know those things. But you should also know what those things mean to you. What motivates you in working with those students? What can you contribute to those students? Were you first gen yourself and want to pay it forward? When I joined Rollins College, one of the things I really loved was that we have an evening returning adult program. My dad went back to school in his 40s to get his bachelor's degree. He was a US Marine, and he went back when I was in school. And watching him was so inspiring, and seeing the struggles he went through, but also those victories. So I really wanted an opportunity to work with returning adults. And it's been one of the most fulfilling parts of my job, because I knew I could offer something special. So what is it that you can offer? Were you an athlete and you can help work with athletic students? Were you mentored as an undergraduate in research and you want to mentor an undergraduate in research? What is it that motivates you about that student population, right? If you have been committed to social justice and advocacy, going to a school that has those commitments makes sense for you. And you can talk about those things then in your talk. or in your interview process itself, right? And if you're making those really clear connections, they feel better that you've done your research, you know who they are, and not lip service to the research. Not like, oh, I know 60% of your students are, yeah, and what does that really mean to you? What's the story that tells you about our institution? And what's the story you can tell me once you connect here? And then lastly, about them, who are they as an institution? Not just are they a research school, a teaching school, a state school, a community college, but what is their mission? Go read their mission on their website, right? Go to their homepage and check it out. What is their most recent, so here at Rollins, for example, our president, Grant Cornwell, has done all these speeches that have made national news, right? If that's been happening at the school you're going to, you need to have seen that. You need to know what that college is trying to do. You need to know what they're trying to do with their students, with their faculty, with their staff, in their community. You should have a sense of whether they're trying to grow, whether they're staying small, whether the department you'd be joining is valued in that institution, and whether your department will be trying to make a case for being valued. So really knowing who they are, big picture. So that's characters. Who are you and who are they? The next sort of standard in storytelling is settings. And I mean settings in two ways. First, where the hell is this happening? Are you going to be in a big room? Are there going to be a lot of audience members? Are there going to be undergraduates and graduates? Are there going to be cameras? Are there going to be microphones? What's going to be happening for you physically in the setting? But also, you have to tell them the stage you're coming from. You have to situate your work in the field, and if possible, in relation to them. Even in the teaching demonstration, you need to situate the lesson in what they've learned before and will be learning. So you have to look at the syllabus and know, where does this sit? Where does my research sit? Where does my teaching sit? Where does my pedagogy sit? Where does my attitude sit? Right? Really setting the stage for people and being really explicit about that in your talk. That this is what I'm going to do today. And when I get to the section on plot, that'll become even clearer, that you've really got to sort of set the stage for the people in the room. And again, once they kind of know where they're situated, they can start to sort of access in their own mind whether that works for them, and you can kind of see how they respond to that. So plot. And this is going to look a little different for research and teaching. I've seen more and more schools get away with the teaching demo. They don't do it anymore. I think that's a mistake. You can't learn a lot about someone's teaching from this kind of research talk. So you might have to do some adjustments if all you're being asked to do is a research talk. But in either case, I'm going to walk through both, the research and the teaching focus. So the most important thing when you start your research talk is to say your name. That sounds weird, right? But it's so important that you take a minute and you connect with your audience. Tell them who you are, tell them where you're coming from, and tell them what you're here to do. Not just my research is on, but I came today to share this for this reason, right? To really have kind of an underlying motivation for why you're in the room. It can be helpful to think of this as more than just trying to get a job, but also trying to share your work, trying to make connections. You might not get that job, but you might find some people in the room that you can collaborate with going forward. So take a minute and introduce yourself, say your name, and talk about why you're here. When you're doing a research talk, you should have a nice preview, the way we expect our students to do in a good old public speaking class. And I've seen so many candidates just dive into the data. I'm not ready for your data. I don't even know what we're talking about. You've been working on this for hours, weeks, days, years. You know what you're doing, but I have no idea. This is my first time coming at it. So take a minute and say, I'm going to talk about X for this reason. I'm going to take this perspective, I'm going to argue this thing, I'm going to share my future ideas, write a really good preview statement to sort of get you through that plot. The other thing to be mindful of, I'm going to use the mindful word a lot today, is this a coherent narrative from beginning to end? Don't write this like a journal article. It's not a journal article. I don't have it in front of me to work through. Don't turn PowerPoint slides into some sort of intense, lots of words literature review that you're reading to me. Really try to create a narrative about your research. Talk about why you got into it. Talk about who your participants were, your subjects were. Talk about your method, of course. Talk about your theory. But the most important thing is, what are you offering? Not just to the field, but to this department, and to knowledge, right? What are we giving? What does it do that I spent this time understanding these particular people? What does it do that I'm telling this story? What does it do that I chose this method? So when I talk about mindfulness, I feel like I'm doing more than just mindfulness in my classroom, but I'm thinking about our sense of wellness beyond that. So having that kind of broader narrative about your research talk. One of the other things I see happen a lot, a sort of pitfall, is even the best communication faculty forget some basics of public speaking. They forget to plant their feet, they forget to take a deep breath, they forget to have water, they forget transition statements, they forget to remind the audience of where we've been and where we're going. You're just so excited to get to the data and prove your worth that you forget that you're supposed to be engaging with your audience. Don't forget to do audience analysis. Who's going to be in the room? How much will they know? If there's going to be undergrads in the room, try to explain the theory in layman's terms so that they walk away understanding it. And you better believe that the committee is talking to those students afterwards. They're asking what they thought. They're talking to the graduate students afterwards. What did you think? Could you imagine yourself working with this person? Do you feel like you could learn in their classes? So make sure you kind of go back to those really basic principles of public speaking, making eye contact, figuring out where you're going to stand, checking out the room before you come in, all of those good things that we know to do but we often forget. And don't treat it like a list. You don't have to cite everybody in the research talk. You did in your dissertation, you don't now. Give me a couple of key names, a couple of key things. Just show me how you're, again, situating, right? Setting that stage for me. Where does this fit in the field? But don't feel like you have to cover everything. There's going to be a Q&A. And if there is that person, and there will be that person in the room who has to know why you didn't mention so-and-so or why did you pick that methodology, you get to have a more informal conversation where you can tap into yourself a little bit and feel more confident about answering that. And then you haven't alienated any member of the audience who was like, I don't care. Because there are those two, they just don't care. The same is true now when we think about plot for your teaching. How many of you teach regularly already? Okay, and if it's new to you, there's lots of resources for us to get you up to speed. One of the things that we get in a classroom is a full semester of building rapport, of situating the class, of a syllabus, of repeating what'd you guys learn last week? Here's what we're gonna do next week. You don't get that in a teaching demo. So you have to build that in. You've got to read that syllabus, you've got to know what they've been doing, what they're gonna be doing, and what you're adding that's unique, right? That you are a guest talk for them. Really, you're a guest lecturer in that space. So what are the students getting from you that's kind of an exciting opportunity? And how can you connect that to the faculty that's teaching the class, right? Acknowledge that professor. Spend a few minutes at the beginning of the class letting them know what the day is gonna look like. Tell them the plot of the day. Today I'm hoping to do X. Here's the takeaway I'm gonna try to get you to by the end of this class. And when you come back next week with your professor, here's how you'll be able to use it. It's okay to do some of that sort of meta talking, right? That this is what I want. I'm gonna have you raise hands. I'm not gonna have you raise hands. I want lots of discussion. I'm gonna lecture. I wanna do an activity. If you get an opportunity to do a teaching demo, take full advantage of showcasing who you are as a teacher. Don't just lecture. You're gonna do that in your research talk. They're gonna see what your lecture looks like, but try to do an activity. If you always do experiential learning in your classes, do it when you go there. Make sure you've planned for that. Make sure you take some time to talk to some students, learn their names, have them put name cards out so you can call on them. Do the same things that you would do in any class, but just in that one little window. If you don't get an opportunity to do an actual teaching demo, you'll have to find some strategic ways to talk about your teaching in your research talk. The truth is they can't tell what kind of teacher you are from your research talk. But you can talk about it, right? You can sort of share that narrative and say, if I were to share this research with my students, I'd be saying this right now. Here's something I would do to explain this to them. Here's a way I would integrate students into this research. But it's challenging, and I'm happy to talk some more about what happens when you only get that one opportunity. Okay, so we have who you are, who they are as your characters. We have a setting, what's going on here. We have a plot. And then the other step of the story is the climax. And I thought long and hard about, is there a sort of climax in the research talk? And I thought, yeah. The climax is the hero slaying the dragon, right? It's the aha moment. It's the turning point of the story. So what do you want your aha moment to be? What do you want that group of people to know about you as a scholar at the end of that talk? What moment should they have where they say, oh, I know what they do. I know who they are. I get this person. I get their research. The same with the classroom. What moment do you want the students to have where they say, oh, I've learned that. I didn't know that before I walked in today, right? What's that peak moment for you? That doesn't mean you're going to tell everybody, hey, here we're at the climax. But you want to kind of build that into your own thinking, and it will be evident in the way you walk through your steps. Then the last one is resolution. And there's sort of two parts here. The first part is the actual resolution of your talk or your teaching. Don't just, thanks, I'm done. Really close it up with a good old summary, a restatement of what you've done. And I mean this both for the research talk and the teaching demo. What did we do today? What can you use next time? Set your future research agenda. When you're doing your research talk, don't feel like you have to cover every single thing. It is much more important to give a taste of what you've done and show us that you're going to have a coherent and sustainable research agenda beyond this point. So you want to build in time for that resolution. Now that I have found XYZ in this data, here's what comes next. This is going to be resolved. There's going to be more work to be done. Here's the future agenda setting I'm going to do. And take a moment to reiterate your motivations as a scholar or your motivations as a teacher, right? Really have that as a sort of resolving moment. But there's also resolution for you. You're going to finish this talk and you're going to go back home, hop on a plane or get in a car, and you're going to go right back to being busy. And again, I've mentioned self-care, so here it comes again. Take a beat. Good for you. You went on a campus interview, and these are hard. It's hard as the search committee, it's hard as the candidate. These are really intense, they're time consuming, and you did it and you survived. Go back home and eat a healthy meal, get a good night's sleep, do something that you enjoy and love, and do not tell me you don't have time. You do have time. In this culture of busyness, that's a myth. You do have time, you're choosing to spend that time in these other ways. And so I encourage you to have some resolution. One of the things I did when I was in the market, and that I encourage graduate students and candidates, and even undergraduates when they go into sort of industry jobs, is to write about your experience when you get home. What did you learn? What did you learn about those faculty? What did they say that stood out to you? Especially if you do get the job offer, and you're trying to remember, what was it? Did I like that place? You might go on a number of campus interviews. So have some notes about the process. When you're sitting on the plane, you've got some time, how did you feel? What do you want to do better next time? Where did you do well? Where do you need to improve? Who did you like? Who do you want to contact again? What did you not like? What are some things about that institution that stood out to you? What student did you meet that if you got this job you'd want to connect with, right? Really sort of wrap it up and put a nice bow on it before you move on. The other thing that happens in a research talk, and doesn't really happen in a teaching demonstration, is the Q&A. This is absolutely the place where I see the most problems, is in the Q&A. So first, being mindful when you're done with the talk that we are switching to questions and answers. You have to step out of the talk. You have to step out of the data. You have to step out of the theory and the research. And so I encourage you to be mindful in that moment. Take a deep breath. Get a sip of water. You're not in a hurry. They're going to ask their question. You can kind of get settled again. If you're done with your note cards, set them down. Take a minute. And then really think of this as a conversation. When it's open for Q&A, I want you to sort of refocus your energy on those audience members. The other thing I see happening is a defensiveness about questions. So someone asks a question, they mean it harmlessly. Hey, why did you pick that method? And you go right into what your dissertation defense probably looked like. I have to prove to you that this was right. But I want you to come from a place of curiosity. Really listen to the question. What do you think they want to know? Why might they want to know that? And if you think of it as a place of curiosity, it doesn't feel face-threatening to you. It really feels like they want to understand your story and they want to connect with you. If you've done a good job telling a story, the questions are going to be so much more fulfilling. They won't have to go back and say, can you tell me what that data was again? You already had a strong plot. You don't have to go back to that. They can really ask you questions about what's next, or even more enjoyable is when they ask you questions that let you dig into the data you had. Oh, can you talk about your participants? Did anybody say this? And you really get to kind of go back to the juicy bits, right? So if you've done a really good job, the Q&A can be enjoyable. And if you come at it from a genuine place of curiosity, I really want to hear from you as an audience. I really want to talk to you. I want to know what this inspired in you. I want to see if we can connect on something that inspired you. The Q&A seems less daunting. The other thing about Q&A is to shut up. Take a minute. When they ask you a question, don't launch right in. Take an actual full 30 seconds if you need to. And pause. Think about the question. Thank them for the question. And not lip service. Not like when you hate the question and then you say, what a great question, and you don't mean it. You really should be grateful for every question you get. It gives you an opportunity to have a dialogue about this work that's been so important to you and so much a part of your life. So if you come at it from that place of curiosity and enjoyment, the Q&A seems more fulfilling for you, right? It seems less scary. And then don't forget to resolve the Q&A. Thank them for their questions. Tell someone, hey, I didn't get to really answer you fully. Can we connect after the talk? Invite somebody up to connect with you again. Really think of the Q&A as not just a sort of at last step, but as that full wrap up of your connection during your research talk and your teaching demo. You don't get a Q&A usually in teaching demos, but a couple of candidates I've seen actually built in some Q&A. The last 10 minutes of class, they said to students, what do you want to know about me? What would you like to know about my research? What would you like to know about what we did today? What's a sticking point left for you? And I thought that was brilliant. I thought, yeah, you should have a Q&A with these students, because we are asking the students what they think of the candidate. We do want to know. And if you do get the job, now they're excited to take your classes, and they come in kind of ready to go, and they all talk to each other, right? They all gossip. And so if you've done this, they really feel like they've connected with you. So I've kind of walked through thinking of the research talk and the teaching demo from the frame of a story. Your characters, your setting, your plot, your climax, your resolution. This is not to say that you should write it as a story or that you should be telling people you're writing it as a story, but if you've engaged in this self-reflection, if you've taken an opportunity to really know who you are and what you want, and what the goal of these talks are going to be for you, if you've really taken an opportunity to write a coherent narrative, both within the talk, but big picture, you're going to walk away feeling really confident about what happened. And regardless of whether you get the job or not, that was a growth experience for you. That was a learning experience. Now that I've done enough of these things, my ideas of a job talk are so different than those first days where I was nervous and terrified and trying to prove myself. I really thought, I'm a colleague. And I'm a colleague in this discipline whether I get this job or not. So let's connect. Let's use this opportunity to get to know each other. Let's use this opportunity for me to get asked some cool questions that inspire more research or new kinds of teaching. So I hope that you'll take from this, maybe not that it's a kitschy story, but really that it's us connecting. And to get a job or to be part of this field, we want to feel connected to each other. I think so often our work is solo and independent and alone and in the library and on a computer screen, and we forget that there are people who are having these conversations. And we come to this convention and we try, but think of your job experience, your market experience, as another place for that. And maybe it'll feel less intimidating. Maybe you'll get the job. I hope you'll tell me if you get the job. If none of this works, I hope you'll tell me that none of this worked. If it does work, I hope you'll tell me that it worked. And I hope you'll sort of help mentor other people as they come upon the job market and help bring new eyes to that. So I wanted to keep my talk short because for me, the question time is the most fulfilling time. So I'm going to end there and open it up to the kinds of questions that you have. Yes? Yes.
For the flyer that they're preparing. How formal does the photo need to be?
Yeah.
Should I go get headshots done at Target or something? You know.
Mm-hmm.
And do I summarize my research talk in this bio, or is it more like who am I as a scholar?
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
Yeah.
Content that they're expecting?
So the question about, so she's asking, they ask you for some sort of photo and bio for a flyer or handout that they're giving. They're announcing you're coming on campus. So for the photo, what do you want to look like? Right? What is the image you want to give to this population? What is it that you want to know? I would go get a professional photo, right? That for me seems important to have the look I want to have. I want you to see me as a colleague and a scholar. I want you to see me not as a graduate student, not as just, I want you to see me as someone who's established. But if you want to seem fun, you could go Josh Gunn style and have a handlebar mustache if you want in your photo, whatever works for you. But I would get a photo. In terms of the bio, keep in mind, again, so come back to some good old comm classics here. Who's your audience? They're going to send this flyer to lots of departments to try to advertise. So I wouldn't summarize my whole research. I would give a nice summary, big picture, keeping in mind that the audience is going to be some comm folks and some non-comm folks. And so what would I want those people to know? How might I get a sociologist in the room or a psychologist in the room? How would I get some people to come see my talk beyond the communication faculty? And so I would give a little taste of the topic of the talk and sort of your general area and what motivates you, right? Really think of that as a little mini story of who you are as a teacher and scholar. Yeah, it's a great question. Other questions? Yeah. No, that's fine.
You can only get so much information from the internet. It's usually not the true story. So how do you have some other strategies about getting the true story about a faculty and how they actually operate? How they get along?
Yeah, so his questions, if you couldn't hear him, was getting to know the faculty, and you can only learn so much from their bios on their web pages, from reading some of their journal articles. One of the tips is to use your network, not in a gossipy, tell me all the dirt kind of way, but sort of in a gossipy, tell me all the dirt kind of way, right? Find out from graduate students who've gone to that school how the faculty treated them. I think that's a really key telling moment is how they treat graduate students, right? Did they mentor you? Did they support you? At the University of Illinois, I had an organizational communication scholar and a rhetorician on my committee. That doesn't happen at every program, right? And so asking graduate students, asking other folks, have you met that person? What's their style? But then also using those beginning meals when you first get there and you're having that first sit down, the instinct is to let them ask you a million questions. I say turn that on its head. Because this is as much about you deciding whether you want to go there as it is them wanting you to come in. And so ask them some questions. I went on an interview once where it was pretty clear to me pretty quickly in the first dinner that they didn't ever hang out except for these moments. They really didn't have, and I wanted to be at a place where we were connected and we were family, right? So at Rollins, we have Thanksgiving together if we're not traveling, right? And so I wanted that kind of environment, but I found that out very quickly in the first meal. If you get a phone interview, that's a good place too. When they say at the end, do you have any questions? And you go, no, I have no questions. No, take 10 minutes and ask some questions, right? Ask if they ever collaborate together. Do you guys ever write together? What are department meetings like? You guys working on any projects together? Do you work on thesis committees with students? What's your idea about mentorship, right? Some of the questions that can tell you a lot about their sort of nature and attitude. And you can also tell a lot by what they ask you. So if I went on an interview once where it was pretty clear they were grilling me hardcore about my methodology, and somehow I had this aha moment, it was because they didn't agree on what kind of method they wanted to hire. So somebody was really coming at me and then he kept glancing at his colleague. And so watch those nonverbals, listen to the question. You can read a lot underneath that. And while you're there, if you get an opportunity to sit down with students, I actually encourage you to ask for a student lunch or a graduate student lunch, and a lot of departments will oblige that request, so you can really sit down with them and say, what's it like to be here? What kind of faculty are you looking for? And sometimes they'll say, you know what I don't want? I don't want what we have. And then you go, oh, right? Or they say, oh, you know what I love about our program? And you go, oh, I hear there's really good stuff. I would fit in here. Yeah.
So in like the potential 4-day experience, there's a lot of
Hopefully it's
eating,
not 4 days.
right? There's a lot of eating experiences
Yes.
which are also sharing, formative. Do you have any suggestions, for example, like I'm gluten-free and I want to be polite and I don't want to like not eat what they provide, and then we're trying to talk while eating. I mean, should I just bring granola bars? Or do you have any suggestions for how to navigate?
Yes. So first, yes, bring snacks. Always bring snacks. This doesn't sound very official or breaking news, but always bring water and snacks of your own. You should be working with an administrative assistant to set up the talk in the first place, and you should communicate right up front with them whatever your dietary needs are. And if they have a good admin, then that person's going to take care of it for you. But the other thing is, don't be apologetic about your particular needs, any of your needs, right? If you have a physical ailment, if you know you're going to be jet lagged and you need extra time, don't be apologetic about self-care. Be your own advocate. And so feel free to say, oh, I'm gluten-free. Not apologetically, but I'm gluten-free. And don't feel awkward about that. If they're judging you for that, you already don't want to be there, right? And the other thing about these meals is to order carefully, order a fork food, not a big burger, right? Think about, that you're going to be taking a lot of time to stop talking, but also feel free to eat your meal. That's where asking them a question helps. And they love to talk, right? We all love to talk. Look at me doing it right now. We love to talk. And so let them talk and don't feel like you have to stare at them. Go ahead and return to your meal, right? One of the things that happens is we become something else. We sort of button up and we get really nervous and our shoulders. Take that moment for self-care. Take that deep breath. Remember that those meals are meant to be Could we be colleagues? These people are trying to decide whether we can spend years, decades even, working with each other. We've got to treat those meals as a friendly meal, right? Pretend like you're going to someone with a meal at NCA. You wouldn't act like that there. You wouldn't apologize there. Do the same thing with those, right? And I think the meals are the most important thing. Every search I've ever been on, the deciding factor was usually, well, at that dinner, I really got this feel. Oh, that breakfast really showed me. Yeah, we learn their research, and everyone's brilliant, so how do we make a decision? And it usually comes down to those one-on-ones. It's the way they treated the administrative assistant. It's the way they treated the students. It's the way they said hi or didn't say hi on campus. It's those kinds of things that make all the difference. Yeah. Other questions? Yes? Mm-hmm.
When they go back and talk to them. Can you share your experience of what grad students have mentioned to you that was positive and some negative, so we can kind of make sure we're cognizant of what to not do and what to do?
Yeah. So I'll start with the positive. When graduate students have a candidate they really like, they can picture working one-on-one with them. This person inspired me. I feel like this person would motivate me. They could keep me on track. They would get me excited. They're on top of their field and they want to work with me. And on the flip side, when it's pretty clear you don't want to work with a graduate student, they know. They can tell that you were pushing them off and you're not interested. And the other thing they're looking for is, whether you seem pleasant enough to spend time with. Do I want to take a long seminar with you? Do I want to know you for years? Think about your relationships with your professors as a graduate student. You spend years working with them and having meals with them and doing all of these things. And so graduate students really are looking for someone who seems like they're interested, like they're excited, like they're pleasant to be around. They're not necessarily looking only for the most brilliant scholar either. You don't have to always be talking in theory code. You can really be talking about why you're motivated to do the work. And they're looking for someone to inspire them too. And they're looking to someone to say, are you gonna walk me through this? Are you self-aware enough to know what I'm gonna need as a graduate student and help me get to it? Or do you seem scatterbrained and have no idea? The negatives I've heard is they don't want to connect with us. They didn't seem to really care about working with graduate students. None of their classes seem interesting. They talk to us like we were beneath them, right? They want to be talked to like their future colleagues, and that's what you should be talking to them like. And then this sort of odd thing happens sometimes. Sometimes graduate students have said, I just don't think they liked it here. Right? They get a vibe from you. I think as students, because they're not hiring you, they're in tune to some things that maybe the search committee isn't, and they'll say, oh, I know they're not digging it. They don't get this place. They don't get who we are. They don't get what we're doing. Their research is bizarre. They're never gonna fit. And graduate students will be really honest. If you're on the other side of the coin, undergrads and graduates will tell you exactly what they saw with a candidate, right? But this is, again, know yourself. Know who you are. Be willing to tell that to the graduate students. Be willing to talk to them about your path and your journey. Be willing to share with them that it was hard and that you have some tricks and tips to help them get through it. Be yourself, right? Don't turn into some other version of yourself. Yes, be your professional self. I'm not saying wear yoga pants and, a t-shirt, but be yourself, right? Let those moments where you're having that dialogue and that interaction allow for connection, allow for a feeling of community. Yeah, these are great questions. Any other questions? Yes.
Speaking with a lot of the job talks that you do, you have to sit down with the chair or the dean, and what sort of advice do you have for different, because that's a different type of conversation.
Absolutely.
Than the search committees. What type of conversation do you think that we should kind of focus on?
Yeah, I've even had talks with provosts and presidents. I've had job talks where they send us up the chain. They don't really need to know all the nitty-gritty of your research. You should demonstrate that you're doing research. They're more interested in, do you have a future agenda so you're going to be sustainable here? Are you someone who's going to get tenure at this institution? They want to know how you fit the college. They are less interested in how you fit the department. That's up to the search committee. They really want to know how you fit the college and what you're going to do for the department to strengthen the department in the college. What is your department going to look like if you join it? They might ask some other, sort of off-the-cuff kind of questions about what's your attitude towards this project we're doing. We asked a candidate about our buildings. We're doing all these new buildings. And the candidate was like, I don't know. What do I care about your buildings? But actually, this dean was curious, do you care what's happening on this campus? So you should, that's that point about knowing who, you need to know the institution. You need to know who the dean is. look them up too. Treat them as a part of the search committee. If they're going to put you with the provost, look the provost up before you go in. What's their research? And ask them some questions. In my experience, the dean or provost interviews have been more about you asking questions than them. So don't think of going into the dean and the provost as you having to prove that you've got the research, that you fit the field. That's not really what those talks are for. They're usually an opportunity for you to ask some serious questions about tenure process, about fairness, about student populations, about the growth of the college or the department. So I think in my experience, it's 10 minutes of asking you questions and 20 plus minutes of you asking, right? So don't think of it as quite the same, but do your research. Yeah. Yes, yeah, good questions to ask as a candidate. Well, my first tip is there's lots of resources online about this. If you follow The Professor Is In, if you go to the NCA website, there's lots of these. But some of the questions that I have found to be really telling, I don't say to ask, what's your culture, right? Because then they look at you like they want to give you the line. But what's it like daily to work here? Who are your best friends on this campus? How often do you get to collaborate with each other? What is it that we're concerned about on this campus, right? What's one of our worries about our students, right? So on our campus, mental health is one of our primary concerns. We're creating a lot of wellness programs. So, and then also ask questions about growth, about fairness, right? Is this department growing? What kinds of students are we attracting? Do we have goals with these students? So one of your concerns should be whether there's equitable processes on campus. Shared governance, right? Do faculty get to make decisions on this campus? By the way, read their bylaws before you accept the job. Every college has bylaws. You can get a sense of how involved faculty are. At Rollins, we're extremely involved, but I've been on campuses where faculty make almost no decisions. So asking about, is the tenure process fair? Do we care about equity on this campus? Is there pay equity on this campus? And those questions can be for HR, they can be for your dean. What you're really looking for with the search committee is questions about what it's like to be with them. How often do we connect? What are meetings like? And like I said, there's a lot of really great lists of these questions that are online that you can sort of pull from. And you should have 3 or 4. Don't ever get into a situation where you're like, no, I got it. I know who you are. You don't yet, right? Have some questions. And most of those will come organically for you as you're in the room and you go, hey, I heard someone mention this thing is happening. What's going on there? How's that going? Those kinds of things. I've even asked things like, are you satisfied with your job here? Right? If you could change one thing about this department, what would you change, right? Things like really typical behavioral interview questions that you'd ask in any industry, you can be asking on your job interview. And again, take advantage of the resources that NCA has to offer and the resources that lots of places, Inside Higher Ed, Chronicle of Higher Ed, they've got all of this stuff out there. And I'm happy to email with folks and offer lists of questions that I've used in the past that gave me a lot of help. Yeah. Yes. One more question and then we'll wrap it up. I would take minimal notes, occasionally write down some keys, and then after the meeting is over, fill in what you can. You don't want to be spending the whole time looking like a student, like you're writing down everything they say. Thanks so much for coming. We have to wrap up now, but I'm happy to answer more questions off the side, take emails. Good luck. Enjoy the rest of the convention. Thanks, folks.